Hi, and welcome to the presentation on whether globalisation is good or bad. This presentation will generally review the positive and negative effects of globalisation. Further, it will provide a brief overview of globalisation in the United States, Australia, and China's economy. Lastly, it will dive deeper into globalisation in Mexico being a developing country and New Zealand being a developed country. Firstly, we will look at the positive effects of globalisation. These are a rise in jobs in developing countries. Countries are able to specialise in particular products, thus having a comparative advantage. Access to larger market leads to higher demand for products, which in turn leads to the benefits of economies of scale. A larger variety of materials and goods. Lower prices leading to greater wealth. Advancements in technology and knowledge. And a reduction of culture barriers. Further, we will look at the negative effects of globalisation. These are increased unemployment in developed countries, increased management costs for multinational companies, countries become dependent on each other, increased pollution, depletion of non-renewable resources, higher demand for goods resulting in price increases, and lastly, small businesses dying out. Now, we will look at globalisation in the United States. Many economists have differing views as to the effect globalisation has had on the American economy. Some of the prominent views include: firstly, globalisation has benefited American consumers as they have gained from a wider choice of products at lower prices. Secondly, shareholders in companies have largely benefited from high profits due to the low costs from mass production in developing countries. Thirdly, it has been identified that America has lost many manufacturing jobs and white-collar jobs to outside countries. This is predominantly due to the cheaper wages and expenses in developing countries such as India and China, as well as technology advances in the communication channels, allowing jobs to be completed in numerous locations. As a result, there is high competition for job positions, which has in turn shown to decrease wages in the United States. This is demonstrated in this graph, which highlights that from 2001, the US employment rate started dropping. This is a small time after international trade in China began increasing substantially. Therefore, one reason for this drop may be because of America outsourcing jobs to China. However, it is important to note that in the last couple of months, some big manufacturing factories such as Apple's Mac computer have moved international factories back to the United States due to the transportation costs and increased wages in low developed countries. For example, in year 2000, Chinese factory workers received on average 52 cents an hour. However, this is expected to rise to $6 by 2015. Additionally, the high transport costs are due to the higher oil prices and freight rates. Lastly, a big factor in America's prior economic success is their innovation skills, in which have benefited their manufacturing industry. However, globalisation has given the world their research and development success, in particular in the technology sector, allowing other countries to adapt to the new developments. Consequently, some believe America may have lost their competitive edge. Next, we will look at globalisation in Australia. Similar to America, many economists have differing views as to the effect globalisation has had on the Australian economy. Some of the prominent views include: Australia has an abundant amount of natural resources that is too much for the population to consume. Therefore, globalisation has allowed Australia to sell the surplus resources such as coal, uranium, iron, cereals and animal products to the world, providing income to their economy. Secondly, similar to the United States, Australian industries such as manufacturing have been negatively affected due to the cost of labour. Consequently, it has led to the loss of many white-collar jobs. This is predominantly due to the cheaper wages and expenses in developing countries, as well as technology advances. Lastly, globalisation has enriched the Australian society as more migrants have entered the country, introducing new food, music and customs. Next, we will look at globalisation in China. Most economists can agree that China has reaped substantially from globalisation and has been beneficial to a vast amount of the population. Prior to China going global, they were a very poor country. However, since the late 1900s, China's international trading has shown outstanding economic growth, in particular with a high GDP growth rate. This occurred largely due to the amount of Chinese individuals being skilled and hard-working labourers who did not require a large wage in comparison to the developed countries. Additionally, due to China entering the international market later than other countries, they were able to adopt advanced technology. Consequently, developed countries saw the potential and began investing in China. In particular, this has benefited China's poverty rate and developed the country largely, improving citizens' quality of life. However, it is important to note that globalisation has come at a cost for China as well. Income disparity between rural and urban regions continues to increase, clearly showing that China's increased GDP has not been distributed equally. Further, in an attempt to reduce production costs, many citizens work in terrible and dangerous conditions. Next, we will look at globalisation in Mexico. In the mid-1980s, Mexico, being a low-developed country, entered the globalised economy by joining the World Trade Organization. This immediately enabled Mexico to benefit from investments through developed countries investing in their economy. In particular, the investment by manufacturers who were attracted to Mexico because of its proximity to the United States, cheap labour and relaxed rules for foreign investment. Consequently, they purchased land off locals to build factories, which in turn additionally provided large amounts of employment. Overall, this has facilitated Mexico's economic growth over the years. However, this benefit has come at a cost. Firstly, due to the large amount of agricultural land sold to foreign developers, the agriculture production dropped considerably. Secondly, the large scale of growth in the manufacturing industry has forced many small and mid-sized companies into bankruptcy. Thirdly, the investments were predominantly situated in northern Mexico due to the abundant mineral deposits, power population densities, and closer proximity to the United States. Consequently, while northern Mexico was getting richer, resulting in higher inflation, GDP, and thus costs, southern Mexico got poorer as prices increased and work decreased, leading to them getting into greater poverty. Fourthly, in many people's opinions, globalisation has caused Mexico to lose their traditional Mexican traditions and culture. This is continually being phased out as citizens, particularly in the rural areas, are pressured to adopt more secular attitudes and behaviours. Lastly, the working conditions in the factories are in some cases terrible and dangerous for the citizens. The principal issue of globalisation in Mexico is the increase in corn prices due to the increase in the United States' use of corn ethanol. This is shown on the top left graph. In 2007, the United States began producing high volumes of corn in which the government was providing financial subsidies to increase production. Consequently, due to the high volume of corn, the price decreased dramatically, resulting in Mexican farmers being unable to compete against the United States price. As a result, exports decreased and many farmers went into extreme poverty or abandoned their farm to work on others. This decrease in demand for their corn led to Mexican farmers to produce ethanol from their corn crops, in which the United States purchased. Through doing this, the cost of corn domestically increased largely due to the low amount of production. Consequently, many Mexicans were unable to afford corn. This became a major health issue in Mexico as corn is a staple food and a major ingredient in tortillas, which provides many vitamins and protein, resulting in civilians being poorly nourished and increasing poverty. The increase in tortilla price is shown on the bottom left graph. The government now imports corn at a lower price from the United States to ensure the price of corn and tortillas stay low. Nevertheless, this has continued to be a recurring issue in Mexico as prices fluctuate and poor get poorer. Mexico compared to China. Mexico and China were reasonably both in a similar situation after World War II, both having very poor economies. On the reflection, both countries have prospered since the time. However, China on a much larger scale. The following points are some reasons why Mexico hasn't reaped the benefits like China. Firstly, after the Mexican government went global, they failed to stay competitive due to their weak laws and culture of corruption, making it difficult for investors to do business in their country. This was not the case in China. Secondly, The Mexican government has shown signs of being unstable, which discourages foreign investors. For example, they have been unable to maintain sound economic policies such as whether they are pro-labor or pro-business. Thirdly, Mexico has monopolies controlling everything such as electricity, bread, landline rates and mobile rates, resulting in greater division between wealthy and poor. Fourthly, Mexico workers are underskilled compared to those in China. Fifthly, due to the lack of education and good and motivated workers, they migrate looking for better opportunities, resulting in less skilled workers in Mexico. Due to the previous experience with poor leadership in Mexico, many civilians are against foreign investment and globalisation, making it hard for foreign involvement into the country. Next, we will look at New Zealand. Similar to Australia and America, there are differing views as to the effect globalisation has had on the New Zealand economy. A dominant benefit on how globalisation has affected New Zealand is the increase in international demand for their commodities, in particular products from the agriculture industry. Since globalisation, demand for the agriculture goods has been steadily increasing due to a rise in population, income and demand. For example, Asia is a big importer of New Zealand's agriculture products. Growth in the Asian middle and upper classes has created a greater demand for international premium produce, such as goods produced by New Zealand's agriculture industry, such as animal products, fresh fruit and vegetables. The increase in demand has also increased prices and thus increases their profit margin. The dominant negative aspect on how globalisation has affected New Zealand is that since globalisation, their economy has suffered due to job losses and high prices. Prior to globalisation, they were one of the best, if not the best run country economically, as they had one of the highest standards of living in the world with very little unemployment. However, since globalisation in the late 1960s, all manufacturing in New Zealand was abolished and consequently many lost their jobs to low developed countries. Further, wages decreased and the price for goods and services increased, causing civilians to work long hours for a small salary. Since globalisation, many New Zealand civilians have gained employment internationally, in particular Australia. This is due to civilians moving to locations such as Australia where they can have a similar lifestyle, however have higher wages and capital returns. Consequently, New Zealand needs to ensure they provide attractive employment opportunities for international workers to relocate to their country. To date, they have been able to gain foreign workers as the lifestyle in New Zealand is attractive. The graph to the left demonstrates that there is a net outflow of skilled workers from New Zealand. However, in general, New Zealand gains more skilled workers than it loses. Overall, the effect of migration is a net gain of skilled workers to the New Zealand labour force. Now we can compare the different countries. This graph is from the Bureau of Labour Statistics and supports that Mexico, being a developing country, has a low unemployment rate in comparison to the developed countries, being Australia, New Zealand and the United States. This may be for a number of reasons, such as the effect the global financial crisis had on the developed countries, thus increasing unemployment, or the effect of globalisation on Mexico increasing employment due to the high and increasing amount of international investment, with specific reference to manufacturing jobs in the factories. Additionally, it highlights that since 2000, the unemployment rate has been rising in Mexico. This may be due to the loss of corn farmers or that the United States and potentially other developed countries are putting fewer factories in the country due to increasing wages and their unsettled economy. However, due to all countries' unemployment rate increasing in 2008, it demonstrates that some of the increase in unemployment is the flow-on effects of a global financial crisis in which, due to globalisation, affects all countries. This graph from the Bureau of Labour Statistics identifies the difference in unemployment rates between the education groups is very small in developing countries in comparison to the developed countries. This may be because the manufacturing industry does not require skills or education, thus ensuring low-educated individuals do not have a disadvantage when obtaining manufacturing jobs. In contrast, the United States, where many factories have located to developing countries, have a higher unemployment rate of just over 15% among the less educated. This graph from the Bureau of Labour Statistics shows the hourly compensation costs, which are the average salaries for the manufacturing industry for each country. This supports that China has the lowest compensation costs, which in turn is reflected in their very high economic growth, as many international investors gain from the low wages by setting up factories and/or obtaining services through advanced communication methods. Mexico, being the developing country, has slightly higher salary than China. However, the developed countries such as the United States, Australia and New Zealand will have 3 to 4 times higher compensation costs. This supports the fact that developed countries employ individuals from China and Mexico to make a higher profit and/or cheaper products. In conclusion, it is impossible to quantify the effects of globalization. We can only look at the benefits and disadvantages on each country subjectively. Despite this, we can conclude that the extent of globalization on each country is influenced by its society, culture, politics, religion, education, policies, trading partners, and foreign investment. This is evident in the comparison of China and Mexico. The two countries were in a similar economic position prior to globalization, yet have had dissimilar outcomes post-globalization. Thank you for listening to the presentation. We would love to hear from you, so please do not hesitate to post any questions.